Hello, lovers and friends. Welcome to another Motivation Mondays episode. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your day. And listen, last week is over. It's done, it's dusted. There's nothing you can do about it. All we can do is set our eyes on the future and hope to do better this week. So sit back, relax, whether you are listening on your way to work, or it's the end of the day, or you're listening while you're in the shower, getting ready for a hectic day. It doesn't matter. Relax, listen, and let's get through this topic together. I'm excited, you're excited. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so in today's episode, we're going to talk about how one builds their tolerance to a life they've never lived before. And it's going to sound strange, but bear with me. We're going somewhere. If you know me, you know that for whatever reason, the way my mind works is that things only make sense if we go around the mountain a little bit, see the sights, take the scenic route to wherever we're going. I can never seem to make a point in a cute, short, succinct manner, and I really wish I could. I see people, and my friends as well, like they'll send me voice notes where they can tell me their whole life story from beginning to end in like 12 seconds. And something that should be a yes or no answer will take me 30 minutes in a voice note, So we're here, and I am tired of subjecting my friends to my hour-long voice notes. So here we are. We're having this conversation together, and trust me, I'm taking you to something that will hopefully motivate you and give you something to think about for the week. Now, today we're going to talk about how one can get used to anything. I mean, the human mind is a wonderful thing, it is a powerful thing, but at the same time, it can be really destructive. Think about people with mental illnesses who see things and hear things, and for them, it is as real as, grass and sand and everything else that we've all agreed are real. Those things are just as real to them, even though, objectively speaking, there's no one talking, right? There isn't some fantastical fairy floating in the corner of the room. It's not there, but in that person's mind, it is as real as anything else that is in that room. The mind is constantly playing tricks on us, and we need to find a way to combat that, right? Find what the objective reality is in our own lives. Because as much as we may not be seeing fairies and dragons, flying around and hearing voices, to some extent, all of us experience some sort of dissociation from reality, right? Based on how we were raised, based on what we were taught to believe about society and about ourselves, we see things differently, which is why, 10 people can witness the same accident and come away with 10 different stories. Our perception and our perspective informs our reality. And as a result, no one can really say what is and isn't real, right? To a certain extent. Obviously, the accident did happen, and there's evidence of that. But how it happened, why it happened, the series of events, all of these things, and what information matters and doesn't matter, all depends on the individual and their mind, right? So think about how the mind protects us, right? How, if you experience anything long enough, the mind decides that, listen, this is not something we need to focus on too much. It's not going away. So we're just going to make it part of the static of life, the little things that make up our environment. And it's not going to be a surprising thing. It's like the paint on the wall. It's not changing, so there's no need for us to focus too much attention on that thing, right? And it's useful because we need that brain capacity to focus on more important things, right? Things that are changing and shifting. We need to assess for potential threats. We need to make big decisions in terms of our future. The mind, your brain needs to focus on just more serious things, but we never pause to question why the paint on the wall actually looks like that. Who painted the wall? Why did they choose that color? What is that color doing to us? What effect does that color have on us mentally, physically, or whatever, right? What emotion is that color eliciting? Be it, subliminally or whatever. What's happening there? We have come to just accept that that's the color, and we almost even forget that our first time interacting with said wall, it caused us a lot of stress and anguish, right? The color stressed us out so much that at some point our mind decided to just shut us off from that discomfort. That this is a level of discomfort that I am not willing to put myself through on a day-to-day basis. Therefore, I need to tell myself a different story about this wall to make my existence with this wall tolerable. So now I have some sort of like Stockholm relationship, Stockholm's lot with this wall. Now it's just a color. It is what it is. I'm not going to question it. I found it like this. I can't seem to remove it. So it is what it is. And in some cases, that's useful, right? There are certain parts about life that we cannot change. And the sooner we accept them, the easier our lives will become, because we will not be inundated with the emotions that come with whatever this thing is that is triggering us so much. But in other instances, right, the situation changes. So now, yes, at the time we couldn't change it, and therefore we had to get used to it. But the brain doesn't update you on the fact that, well, ding, 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 you're older now, you have access to different resources, and therefore you can now change your circumstances, and you don't have to deal with this wall anymore, because the pain and the stress that this wall is causing you, it never went away. You just became numb to it, or you just got used to it, right? And that's what life is sometimes. That's what our mind does sometimes. It helps us get used to the strangest things for our survival, right? Because we needed to survive at a certain time in life, we have become accustomed to things that we should never have to have tolerated in the first place. So, if this is sounding a little too abstract for you, I'm going to bring you to an example that actually made me think about this topic. And that is an intern of mine. I will call him Ted for the sake of, anonymity and protecting his image, and so on and so forth. So Ted wears baggy clothes all the time. Ted often complains about, having itchy skin, and that now that it's winter, the season just affects his skin in a way that, makes it sometimes slightly uncomfortable. Not unbearable, but just a little more uncomfortable than usual. And the reason why he wears baggy clothes is because he doesn't like the feeling of the material against his skin. It makes him itch in a way that is just uncomfortable. So he's adjusted, right? He wears baggy clothes and he rationalizes the itchiness that he feels in winter, by blaming it on the weather. So initially I was like, oh, do you have eczema? And he says, no. And I'm like, oh, do you have another sort of like skin condition? Like, where's all this itching coming from? Because he didn't even want to use hand sanitizer, and it's a requirement of our job that we have to sanitize between classes. And he was just like, no, my skin is extra itchy today, and I know that the sanitizer is going to make it worse, so I'd rather not. And then I thought that maybe he had like a sensory issue, right? That there are just certain textures and sensations that he just doesn't like. So I kind of, chalked it off to that, and I was like, okay, it's not the end of the world. That's how he's operating. That's okay. And then one day I was just like, well, what's going on with this itch? Like, isn't it something that, lotion, isn't there a cream that you can put on to help the itching go away? And he says, no, he doesn't like how lotion makes him feel. And that he doesn't moisturize his body at all. So all he does is he'll use soap and water, wash his body, and then that's it. That's the end of the steps. He dries his body with a towel and gets dressed. There's no lotion, there's no body oil, there's nothing. And I can't imagine it. I can't imagine going through this life with dry skin. I cannot even bear the idea of having dry lips. The moment I feel that any part of my body is dry, I feel as if the skin is going to tear apart or something. The idea of my skin turning white and just being a chalkboard of shame torments me. I have cream in my car, I have cream in every handbag, I have cream everywhere. You can never accuse me of roaming these streets ashy. But here he is, a grown man, claiming to have never applied lotion to his body in the past 8 years. I couldn't even fathom it. And, later on in our conversation, trying to figure out, like, where does this come from? He said that, like, when he was younger, his mom couldn't afford lotion and stuff like that. So he just learned to live without it. Now that he's older and can afford to buy his own lotion, he bought the lotion that he saw everyone else use, right? Vaseline or the dark blue Nivea, and that's what he saw people use, Dawn even. But he didn't like the sensation on his skin. It just felt so uncomfortable to have this thing, this artificial layer, like his whole body was encased in a latex glove, and that it was inhibiting his ability to interact with the world in a way that was familiar to him. He was used to the itch. The itch was home to him. That how he knew himself in his body included that itch, included the dryness of his skin, included the discomfort that came with material brushing against his skin, feeling abrasive because it didn't have that moisture to protect him. And obviously my heart broke for him, right? The genesis of this condition, I'd say, came from a sad place, right? He couldn't afford something as simple as lotion, something we take for granted. But the mind, knowing that this was an agony he could not escape, his mind made a way for him to become numb to this discomfort, that he suffered it for so long that it was his home. And now, even though he has access to the means of his own freedom, freedom feels uncomfortable to him. Freedom is foreign, and therefore it is scary, and it feels wrong, And I thought about myself and how I have tried many times to free myself of certain things that I knew I was never meant to be accustomed to. But every time I tried to move in a more positive direction, the discomfort of feeling exposed and the discomfort of all these new and unfamiliar sensations made me want to crawl back to what was comfortable, even though this quote unquote comfortable space was not a space I should have ever been exposed to, and exposed to such an extent that I became familiar with it. But alas, that is the direction that my life went in. And now here I am, right? So even while we're on this healing journey, right, and we become aware of the different things in our lives that need to change, we become aware of the things that our mind and our subconscious has done to help us adapt to our hostile environment. Being aware of those things doesn't change the fact that we need to build a new tolerance. We need to build a tolerance for love. If you grew up in a space where you were never shown love, as much as you craved it, you craved that love like nothing else. You craved it like the air that you breathe. You were starved of love and you felt those hunger pains. Your mind chose to shield you, to protect you, and you created a story that made that pain make sense. Right? It is easier to tell yourself that actually, I don't want to be loved by these people. I'm okay on my own. I don't need anybody else because I'm fine. That's a story that makes sense. That's a story that in some way shields us from the pain of being disappointed and not being shown the love that we need. That need hasn't disappeared. That desire hasn't dissipated. And as much as we are now in a position to feed that need, to satisfy that desire, we are unfamiliar with having that need met. We don't know what it feels like to be loved. We don't know what it feels like to be cared for. So when someone shows up in our lives and gives us the love that we desire freely and is just handing it out like sweets, we don't know what to do with that. So we reject it because it is foreign to us. Because what we are used to is disappointment and pain. But because we are used to it, we don't recognize it as disappointment and pain. It is just a random wall that we don't even acknowledge anymore. That is just part of the makeup of our reality. It's not something to really focus on because it is a permanent fixture in our mind. We cannot even imagine a life where that wall doesn't exist. The wall has to be there. What is a room without walls? While we're busy arguing, right, the legitimacy of a room with walls, we haven't even touched on the fact that we shouldn't be living in our lives encased in a room, that we should have the freedom to roam, and that we were never meant to be subject to a life closed in four walls with no escape. But that's all we know. That's all we've ever had. And to spare ourselves the insanity of hitting our heads against a wall that was never going to break, we chose to call those walls home. We chose to call the prison of our existence shelter. And how do you then convince your mind? How do you convince yourself that the thing that you have called home is actually a prison. How do you become accustomed to life where there's nothing shielding you from a cool summer's breeze? Because you grew up believing that you were never meant to experience such things. That as much as you have craved the hug of your mom or a friend or just anybody to just hold you, and that you've wanted nothing else but just for someone to hold you. Eyes closed, tight squeeze, deep breaths, and just feel all your muscles relax as you lean into the safe and sturdy embrace. That it also scares you because you've never experienced that before, and that anything that is new is scary. So, how do we build that tolerance? In the same way that we built the tolerance to all the shit that we went through and the shit that we've become accustomed to. We sit in it. We acknowledge the discomfort. We acknowledge where that discomfort is coming from. We become intentional in our pursuit of those uncomfortable spaces. And we build our tolerance bit by bit. So I told you about my intern. Let me be a little more personal with it. I don't like being touched. Obviously, romantic partners, but it takes me a very long time to be comfortable with someone even just hugging me. I don't like people walking behind me. I don't take compliments well. And I'm not good at asking for help. Yeah, those are like the big things that I struggle with the most. And I've been blessed with friends who see the value in having me in their lives, that they're willing to accommodate me, even though they do want to hug me. And walking through a doorway first is impractical in the moment. That they want to tell me the things that they like about me. But they know that they will be met with resistance. And I'm a stubborn individual. Once I've dug my heels in, I'm not going anywhere. But they've been patient with me. And even when I was unable to see these things, because at least now I'm aware of them, but even before I was aware of them, they would tell me that, like, listen, I want to love you and you are stopping me. You're actively working against me being able to show you the love that I have for you, because it was all so foreign to me that I was more comfortable with being mocked, with being hated, with being belittled than I was with being loved and cared for. I have friends who have shown up for me in ways that even now I feel undeserving of. But I am so grateful that they have chosen to show up anyway, because it is through them that I have been able to see myself in a different light. That maybe, as much as I am standing here watching the car accident that is my life, and because of how I was raised and because of my experiences, I've chosen to only see certain aspects of this accident only negative things. I'm not seeing the other 9 people's perspectives. And some people might choose to just keep their opinions to themselves. Some might try and share, and once they're met with resistance, will give up and move on. But I am glad that I have friends who are as stubborn and as persistent as I am, that they have also dug their heels in and have been determined to show me that they love me and have allowed me to fight and thrash against the discomfort that comes with feeling and experiencing something new. That discomfort isn't an indicator of whether something is right or wrong. We are adults now, and we are able to assess, we're able to look at things and access resources and reach out for help if necessary. These are things that we can do now. We can consider other perspectives before deciding on what is and isn't real. And I highly recommend that as we go into this coming week, that we consider what we have become accustomed to and whether that is something we want to be used to in the first place. You think about people who've been in jail for a long time and how they struggle to adjust to life outside of jail because they now have so much free will that it feels overwhelming to have freedom, that it is scary, and that is oftentimes a contributing factor to recidivism. That just the idea of having to make decisions for yourself, you have to now decide what you're having for breakfast. If you don't make a choice, it doesn't happen. When you've spent years not having a choice in what you want to eat, whether you like oats or not, you're having oats. And yes, you might have complained and begrudgingly ate the meal because, well, it's there and you're hungry, so you have no other choice. And years later, you can't even taste the oats. It's just part of the routine of your life. It's that wall that you choose to ignore that has become part of the static of your life. And the whole fabric of your reality is ripped away from you. And now all of a sudden, you don't even know whether you don't like oats or not, or do you like oats, or what about eggs? Is eggs even a thing? Like, what do eggs taste like? Do I like this, or is it just foreign? I don't know. And the people who choose to sit in that discomfort, to suffer through it to the point where they can now tolerate freedom, become accustomed to freedom, they are the ones that don't go back, that they learn to enjoy their freedom, appreciate it, and choose not to trade it for the comfort of prison. And yes, some of them, have families and people that they don't want to leave behind, that they've learned their lessons, and they choose not to reoffend. But especially if you've been in jail for a long time, in prison for a long time, it does also become a matter of how much discomfort you're willing to tolerate, that you're able to tolerate at this time, which is why maybe some people who are determined to change may reoffend a couple of times before finally staying out and changing their lives for the better. In the same way that with you, as you choose to go on a new path, make different decisions, that you might fall back into old habits a few times before finally sticking to this new thing that you want to introduce into your life, be it allowing hugs, letting people walk behind you, or even something as simple as putting on lotion. My intern is now trying. I let him test out different types of lotions. I'm like, okay, well, they're the super thick ones that leave you with like this film on your skin, which is great for winter because it keeps you warm and it like insulates you and stuff. But it's all sticky and it makes you feel clammy. And if you're overly sensitive to such sensations, then it's not the one for you. But there are lotions that are really light and feel watery and absorb into the skin very quickly, so they don't leave any sort of residue. And you can maybe try that. Maybe also try applying your lotion while your body is still slightly damp. Therefore, you won't need as much product, and the lotion works just to seal in the water that will moisturize your body. And for now, he's just trying it on his hands and face, the parts of his body that are, exposed the most. And if he is able to tolerate that, he will graduate to other parts of his body. I am proud of him for at least trying, for acknowledging that this thing that he has become accustomed to is still uncomfortable. That just because he is used to it doesn't make it good. And he's taking the small steps necessary to hopefully get him to a point where he is able to unlearn or outgrow the discomfort of his upbringing. Now, will it last forever? Will he fall back into, old habits and just put on lotion, will just shower, dry himself with his towel and put on his clothes? Probably. But the next time he feels itchy, he won't be so scared to reach for maybe tissue oil or something else that might moisturize his skin, because now he knows that he doesn't have to live with this discomfort, and that maybe it just becomes a matter of readjusting his routine. It might take him a little bit longer to get ready in the morning now that he's added an additional step, and that is the thing that he now needs to become accustomed to. Maybe waking up 5 minutes earlier, or adjusting his budget to include whatever lotion that works best for him. And that adjustment as well might take some time. It all takes time, because it took time to get to this point in the first place. Unfortunately, when we were becoming accustomed to these terrible feelings and sensations, we didn't have a choice but to suffer through it. And therefore, the option to opt out wasn't provided to us, because if we could have, we would have. But we didn't because we couldn't. And now we opt out because we can, even though we shouldn't. So, for this week, like I said earlier, take stock of your life. Take stock of the things that you've gotten used to. Question everything. Question every single thing. Think about whether this is actually something you want in your life. And it can be something as simple as the time you wake up in the morning, or the things you choose to do on your day off, or the type of relationships that you have and how you show up in your relationships, what you allow to accept in your relationships. It could be even the work that you do, that you might have chosen that work because it was familiar to you. And that might stress you out a little. Thinking about this and questioning your reality, questioning what your mind has made you ignore in order to survive, is not a comfortable feeling. So you might choose not to question it. But I encourage you to come back to this question time and time again. The moments when you feel strong, come back to this. Question your reality, because we're not all seeing the same thing. And consider how maybe a different perspective might lead to a better life for you. Isn't that what we all want? Just a better life, a little less stress, a little less discomfort, a little more love. Take stock of your life and see how you have not only become accustomed to a lack of love, but how you may have even taken steps to prohibit it from entering your life because it has caused you so much discomfort, or because you have already resigned yourself to thinking that you will never have it, that you don't even make room for it to enter. So think about that. This week's Monday motivation is not a happy, clappy, woo 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 one, but hopefully it does lead to happiness. It leads to peace, it leads to joy, and it leads to unlearning some bad habits. Be kind to yourself as you question your reality, because especially as you get older, you will also need to acknowledge that you are a co-conspirator in your own destruction. That as much as maybe the framework may have been built by your parents and your environment, that you have continued that construction on your own because it was the only tools that you had, and you were trying to build a life for yourself. So it is not your fault. Forgive yourself for the things that you've done to survive, the things that you've done to tolerate your existence. Forgive yourself before anything else. Forgive yourself. And if that is the only thing that you work on this week, that will be more than enough. Because forgiving yourself is also something that is really uncomfortable to deal with. Because sometimes part of surviving is blaming yourself that, well, it's because I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable, which is why I don't receive love, and which is why I'm undeserving of love. You internalize your pain and suffering when it really had nothing to do with you. The people around you were ill-equipped to meet your needs, and you have continued to choose spaces that mirror that inability, that deficiency, because that's what's familiar. You're familiar with spaces that are deficient in the care that you need. So when you are approached and when you find yourself in spaces that are overflowing in love and care, you run away. And now you have to forgive yourself for running away. You have to forgive yourself for all the relationships that you ruined or that you avoided because you couldn't handle the love that they were giving, the care that they were offering. And that's okay. You know better now, and you're doing better now, and you're going to make mistakes, but that is the joy of learning. Nobody ever gets it right the first time, because if you did, then it wouldn't have been a problem in the first place. You will make mistakes moving forward, and you need to get used to forgiving yourself and being kind to yourself in that process. If you do not conquer forgiving yourself and being kind to yourself, you will not conquer anything else that follows, because you will always revert back to punishing yourself. and reaffirming the idea that you do not deserve the life that you desire. That this hunger that you have for love, affection, care, and lotion are things that you were never meant to have. And that's not true. I'm telling you now that I love you very, very much. I love you because you are. Not you are kind, you are a friend, you are whatever, just because you are. You exist. You are here on this planet, roaming around, and as a result, I love you very much. So, let's go out into this week and examine our lives and start by forgiving ourselves for allowing the nonsense to go on for as long as it has, and see what we can do to change that, to make our lives better. I have started on that journey, and I've gotten to a point where I'm even reconsidering my career. Something that I thought I was deeply passionate about, and that was my life's calling. I'm starting to think that maybe it's just a manifestation of a lot of pain and neglect, and that maybe I need to consider something different. Divorcing myself from something that I had identified with so deeply is scary and uncomfortable, but I'm trying. And I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time. But I hope that together we can go on this journey. And this post will have a question attached to it. And you can talk about the different things that you want to free yourself from, the things that you are working on, and any sort of encouragement that you might need. Share it in the comments below, and when I have a moment, I'll be more than happy to encourage you in any way that I can, because we need each other in this journey that we call life. We are not meant to be islands. We are meant to grow and heal and learn in communion with each other. So if you have no one in your life to hold your hand through this journey, then reach out on Facebook and on Instagram or in the answer to the question attached to this podcast. And yeah, when I have a moment of clarity and peace, I'll be more than happy to share and to encourage. Because this is what this podcast is about. Finding a space for people like us who oftentimes give more than we should to the people around us and leave nothing left for ourselves. So as much as I'm offering this service, I will do so in acknowledgement of my limits. And I hope that you understand that I will act within my limits. Keep well. And in the outro, you will get a little tidbit, a little taster, a little, of what we'll be covering next week. I promise it is a lot more lighthearted, I guess, kind of, sort of, maybe, but a lot more encouraging than, something to sort of bring up the mood. We can't always be living our best lives. Yes, yes, yes. Sometimes we need to sit down and get dirty and do some hard work so that we can reap the fruits of our labor later. But right now it's time to harvest. Oh, not time to harvest, time to sow. Time to sow so that we can harvest later. I love you all very much. And yeah, please enjoy the sneak peek into next week's episode. I love you. Bye. So next week is not going to be so deep, okay? Well, it will be, but it won't be. I'll be sharing awkward stories of, funny situations I found myself in friendships and relationships, and we'll just be talking about the network of people we keep in our lives, be it from friends, lovers, colleagues, even, people that you find yourself making idle chit chat with as you stand in the line at the bank. All those relationships matter in some way or another, and all at varying degrees. And I'll be sharing the lessons that I've learned, while also sharing how we can make better choices moving forward and really assess whether we find ourselves in good company or not. Certain relationships have seasons, while some are meant to last a lifetime. And how do we distinguish the two? So, see you next week. And I love you loads. Bye.